Hello everyone. In this video, we will see how to set up a basic inventory management system using Excel. So inventory management system or IMS should provide us basic information on our inventory levels, uh, more specifically within a given date range. For example, say we wanted to analyze our inventory levels or the stock levels, which is the goods and products that we have on hand. Say we wanted to analyze it for 1 month starting from October 1st, 2022 to November 1st, 2022. Okay, so whatever inventory we might have had on hand on October 1st, 2022, that will be known as the opening stock. Similarly, the inventory that we have left with us, we have with us on 1st November 2022 is called as the closing stock. Now, as we can imagine, in between this date range, before we calculate our closing stock, we might have made some purchases in this 1 month period, and we might have also sold some products here. Okay, so our closing stock would be determined by the opening stock with which we started, and any purchases that we might have made, and any products or goods that we might have sold. So a simple formula that helps us to calculate closing stock is opening stock plus purchases minus any sales that we might have made. Okay, so this is just a simple formula here. So what we'll do is we will try to set up separate tables for each of these measures and see how we can connect all these together. All right, so let's go to a blank sheet here and let's start by creating some sample data. So let's say we wanted to sell some electronic products here. So I'll just have a column called product ID, product name, and for each product we will give some price. So we'll say price per unit of each of these products here. Okay, and then when we talk about inventory in hand, we will also have to keep record of for each product how many units do we have in hand, right? So we'll have a new column here called units. Now let's go ahead and list out some sample products here. So as I mentioned, we'll set up this system for a set of electronic or electrical products that we want to sell. Okay, so let's have laptops, and maybe next we want to sell cell phones here, keyboard, monitors. Okay, headphones, probably some flash drives, some projectors. We'll try to get 10 products here, so we need 3 more, right? Let's also have tablets here. Okay, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2 more. What else should we sell here? Smartwatches probably. Okay, and some VR headsets. Okay, some gaming headsets. Now let's give a unique ID for each of these products here. Since these are electronic products, I'm just gonna give a code of EP100 probably for the first product, and for the second product, naturally it should be EP101, right? So this is one way of entering the product IDs manually, but again, Excel makes this a lot easier for us. So if you observe here, if I select the first cell and if I use this little green square at the end of the cell, and if I try to drag it down here, you can notice that Excel tries to auto calculate what the next code should be. So here it shows the next one is EP101, and if we keep dragging it down like that, you can see that the code is calculated automatically. Okay, so we'll drag it until where we have our products and we'll leave it there. So Excel auto fills with the next natural occurrence in this sequence. Okay, try to it tries to identify the sequence and then it tries to create the code for us. So that's pretty convenient. All right, so let's go ahead and give some average price for each of these products here. Now, let's give a dollar sign in the column name, so that way we will know that this data, the data type is currency here, and that way we don't have to have dollar for each of these values inside this column. Okay, let's go ahead give some sample value here. So let's say the average price of a laptop is 500. For cell phones, I'm going to say 350. Keyboard could be 75. Monitors are probably 120. Headphones 85. Flash drives probably $15. Projectors are 475. Tablets 270. Smartwatches maybe around let's just say 130. VR headsets, just a rough number here, probably 225. Okay. Now for number of units, let's again go ahead and give a random number here, or even better, we can just use a rand between function here. So I can say rand between, and I can ask Excel to choose a random number between say 20 and 75. Okay, and then if I double click on this little green square here, that random function would be applied to all our products, right? So instead of us having to manually type here, we can just use the rand between function for Excel to choose a random value within a given range. All right. Now, let's say this is the raw data that we started with. Now, using this information, we can create a new column here called the stock value. Because the price we have here is per unit, and we have number of units separately. Now, if we want to see what is the total stock value that we have in hand for each of the products, we can calculate the stock value field, which is nothing but a product of these two values here. Okay, so let's just do that, and then double click on this little green square here. So we'll see stock value calculated for each of the product. Okay, so this is our opening table here. I'm just gonna reduce the size of this first column. Okay, and let's just highlight this column headers here so that they can stand out from the rest of the data. So I'm going to select the first cell, Control Shift and right arrow. So all our column headers should be selected. Then we'll go to cell styles and just choose a random color over there. Okay, so we'll stick with this, and we will give a name for this table here. So first, let's just go ahead and merge these three cells. So I'm just selecting these three cells together, and over here I can use this merge and center option, so that will just merge those three cells, and whatever text I type inside this, that will be centered. Okay, so this table can be named as the opening stock table. Now let's bold these letters. All right, so we are done with our first table. Now let's go ahead and create our second table, right? So if we go back to our initial sheet here, so we have opening stock table. Now let's create our purchases table to list out all the purchases that we might have made. Okay, so we'll create that in the same sheet here, and for that one we will use the same column headers. So let's copy paste them here. So Control C and Control V, you should get all this. Now in order to have the column widths, in order to have the column width such that the entire text is visible, so we'll try to adjust the column widths for all these columns at the same time. So select the first column, press the shift key and then select L. So all these columns are selected. Now if we double click anywhere between this range, so all the columns would be auto adjusted according to the text in that corresponding cell. Okay, now We'll list out some purchases here. Now again, whenever we are talking about purchases, one other important column is that we want to record on what date did we make that purchase, right? So we'll insert a new column here. Select this column, right click, insert, and we should have a new column here. Let's give a name to this column as date, and let's just say we made some purchase on 3rd of October. Okay, we'll try to keep our dates between 1st October and 1st November because we were just trying to study our inventory for 1 month. All right, now we'll just choose a random product ID here, right? So one way to do that, let's say we sold some headphones on 3rd of October. So to get this product ID, one obviously brute direct approach is just to manually type in the code for our headphones. Okay, so that's one way to do it. But a better way would be if we can have a drop down here in this cell, if we can have a drop down which lists all the available product IDs, then we can just select the one that we want, right? That would be really cool and convenient. So let's see how to get a drop down here which lists all the different product IDs that are available. Okay, so in order to do that, we will click in any one of the cells here, in the first cell under product ID column. Then we'll go to data tab and this data validation. So if we click on data validation, again select the first option called data validation. Okay. Now in this pop-up window, we will say we want to allow only a list of values, and the source or the list where our values are there for product ID, we'll try to select that under source here. Okay, so click on this little red arrow and we'll go and select all these values here under product ID. Okay, hit enter. Now we have mentioned what values do we want in our list for the drop down. Okay, so once we have this in place, click OK. And then now we can see that we have a little drop down here, right? So if we click on this, we can see that we have list of all our product IDs available. Now before we select something here, let's go ahead and just apply this to all the other cells. Okay, so now every cell under product ID will have a drop down here. Okay. All right, before we start entering data here, let's go ahead and give some borders to this purchases table so that the range is clearly visible, the boundaries are clearly visible. Okay, so once you select all these cells like this, go to the home tab and choose this option, this borders group here. Click that little down arrow and select all borders. Okay, so that way we have all our area clearly marked for us. Now let's just go ahead and randomly choose a product ID 105. Okay, so this is good, but we should also get the corresponding name for the product for this particular product ID, right? So we have the product ID, but we don't know what is the corresponding product for this ID. Again, one direct approach is just to go look at this table directly and try to find out what is the product, what is the name of the product associated with that ID. But again, a better way to do is use some Excel functions, right? So the function that we will use in order to find a value from a different column wherein a value in a previous column is matching. So in order to find this value wherever EP105 is matching, in order to get the product name corresponding to that match, we will use a function called VLOOKUP. Okay, so how we use VLOOKUP is we go to this product name cell here and start typing VLOOKUP. Okay, so as we start typing the function name, Excel will show us what are the values that we need to provide for that function. Okay, so the first argument would be the product ID for which we are trying to look up a different value, right? So select this product ID and we have to mention the table array where we are looking up this value here, right? All right, so we'll just go back a little bit here. We'll come back to VLOOKUP again. We'll try to put all our data in a table format. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if you look at this here, this does look like a table here, but this is not actually a table behind the scene, right? It's just a collection of some cells. So Excel just identifies it as a collection of cells and not as a table. So we have to convert this into a table, and that is going to be very helpful in the further analysis. So just click anywhere in this data range here and then go to insert and choose this table option. Okay, so when you choose that, so it's asking where is the data for our table. So it's taking all the way from B1, but for us our data is only from product ID to here, right? The top one, opening stock, is the header, sorry, the title. We don't want that to be included. So our table is just this, starting from product ID on this corner, ending at 8550 here, okay? So we select that range and it's asking if our table has headers. Yes, it has headers. So we go ahead and say okay here. So now you can see how the format has changed, right? So Excel tables are really powerful for any in-depth analysis. We have to convert our data into a table format first. Okay, it offers many advantages. One of them is that if you observe here, for each column, we have a drop down button here, right? So for product ID, product name, and for all the other columns. So what this will help us do is this will help us to filter our data. Now, instead of looking at information for all the products, say if we wanted to check the information only for monitors, so I can just select that and that's filtered. All right. So that's one of the powerful feature of table here. Now let's go ahead and clear this filter and leave our table as is. We'll see more advantages of using data as a table now as we proceed with this lecture. So now let's go back to writing our VLOOKUP function again. So we have VLOOKUP, again, give the value for which you are trying to look up another value. So I'm going to select this ID, comma. Now, where is our table array? Okay, all right, I apologize again. So we have to go back to our table. I always forget this part. So for this table, we will try to give a table name so that wherever we want to use this data, we can just reference it with the help of that name. We don't have to select this entire range every time, okay? So in order to give a name for this table, click anywhere in this cell, and I think if we go to table option here, you see on your top left hand corner, it has a field to enter table name. All right, so we'll just name this table as stock. Hit enter, and now we have this table named. All right, finally. Now let's go back to writing our VLOOKUP here. So select this cell, type VLOOKUP, select the product ID, give the table name. So our table name was stock, so we can just directly start typing it, and if we see that, we get that in the suggestions, stock table. Okay, so and we can see here the table has been highlighted, showing that this is the table that we are trying to use. Okay, and the next argument for VLOOKUP function is in this table, in which column do we have the value that we are trying to retrieve. Okay, so in this table, we are trying to retrieve product name, and product name is in the second column here. All right, so let's just go and type 2 here. Again, the last argument that we need to provide to VLOOKUP function is that if it should do an exact match or an approximate match, right? So if we select false here, okay, if we select false, it's going to do an exact match. If we select true, it's going to do an approximate match. So what do we mean by that? Say if I have false here, okay, that means VLOOKUP will try to look for this exact match in the product ID. That means it will look for something which has all these characters, EP105, right? So that's what exact match will do. If we use an approximate match here, so even if we have EP10, it will still try to match with something here. Okay, so as we can see here, that might lead to a lot of problems because almost all our product IDs are starting with EP10, right? So if we use an approximate match, we might end up with a wrong lookup value here. That's why it's always advisable to use exact match whenever possible. All right, now let's go ahead and hit enter here, and we can see we have we obtained the value flash drives. Okay, Now let's go ahead and apply this VLOOKUP function to all the other remaining cells here. So just use this little green arrow and drag it across to all the other cells. All right. So now that formula is available in each and every cell here, right? But we are getting NAs here, and that's because VLOOKUP is trying to use the product ID here, right? So in the previous cell, there was a product ID in cell I3, but now it moved to cell I4 because it has to look up for the product name for this particular product ID. Since we don't have anything here yet, that's why we are getting this error. Okay, so even though it's not technically wrong, what is being displayed here, but it doesn't look neat or professional. So there's a way with which we can suppress these errors. Okay, so again for that, we'll go to the first cell. So the another function that we are going to use here is called if error. Okay, so what we are saying here is, upon executing this whole function, this whole VLOOKUP function, it could be any other function in this place. Okay, if error can be used with any other function. So if there was any error while evaluating this function, then what should we do? Okay, comma, what should we do if there is an error? So if there is an error, I just don't want anything to be displayed. So I just give a pair of blank double quotes here, okay, with nothing in between. All right. So if an error is thrown up while evaluating this function, then we want this cell to be just blank. I don't want any value to be entered there. Okay. If there is no error, then we will get the value that was looked up from the product name column. All right. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and let's apply this to all the other cells. All right, there we go. So now we see, even though the VLOOKUP function is available here, and even if the product IDs are not present, we don't have that NA displaying here. Okay, so I think this looks a lot more neater than what we had before. All right. Now let's try to find out what is the price for each unit of this particular product. Okay, so again we have a product ID, and then we need to obtain the corresponding price for that product ID. So we'll again reference to this table here. So if we see, we have product IDs here and we have price here. So every product ID is associated with a particular, not that one, this one, particular price. All right. So again, we'll again use the VLOOKUP here because we are trying to obtain a value from a different column based on a matching value that we find in the first column. All right. So in this case, since our product ID is EP105, so first we have to find out the row where EP105 is matching, and in that row we need to obtain this value. All right. So let's go ahead and use VLOOKUP again. So we'll say VLOOKUP product ID again, comma. Our range is the stock table. Remember, we had named our table as stock, and that's what we used to obtain the product name. So let's start typing stock here, comma. Now, in which column do we have our price per unit? That's in the third column. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3, third column. So let's just say 3. Again, we'll try to do an exact match. So go ahead and give false here. Hit enter. All right. So if we double click on this little green square, so we encountered the same problem as before with NAs. So let's fix this. So we'll go to this first cell. And how do we fix this again? By using the if error function. So if error, again, in case of error, if there is an error, any error while evaluating this, we'll try to just leave that cell blank. Okay, hit enter. Now apply this to all the other cells, and there we have it. Okay. All right. So now we obtained all the values that we wanted. So let's go ahead and fill some sample data here. So let's say we purchased 30 units of flash drives, and to get the stock value, we'll have to multiply these two values together, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So equal to this times this, enter. Now again, let's apply this formula to all the other cells, and we can see now we get a different error message, but it's still an error message because it's trying to multiply the previous two cells and these two cells are blank. Okay, so that's why it got an error here. So we can again fix this using the if error function. All right, so let's go here and let's start typing if error. If there is any error while performing this action, just leave it blank. Okay, there we have it. Double click, and now this is set. Okay, let's go ahead and add a couple more products here. So we say we bought something on the 5th of October, and I'm just gonna select a random product ID here, and you see how these are automatically calculated, right? So using our VLOOKUP function, since we had dragged and applied down, so in this cell it performed a VLOOKUP to obtain the corresponding product name for this product ID and displayed it over here. Similarly, we obtained the price for 1 unit of keyboard using the same VLOOKUP function. Okay, so now let's go ahead and give some random number of keyboards that we might have purchased, and if you go to the next cell, the stock value is automatically calculated. All right, I'm just gonna add one more product here, say on the 6th of October, and let's say we purchased some smartwatches. Okay, so price per smartwatch is 130, and units are, let's say we purchased 57 smartwatches. All right, and that is our stock value. Okay, so we have finished our purchases table here. Let's go ahead and give this some name. So I'm gonna select this cell. Let's actually start from this cell here. So I'm gonna select all the way to L, and I'm gonna do merge and center here. So there we have it. We can name this table as either purchases, or we can also call it as inventory N, because we are bringing in some inventory by making some purchases, or we can also call it as stock in. Okay, it's the same thing, either inventory or stock in. Now let's bold this again. See the bold font here. Okay, so there we have our purchases table. So if you go back to our previous sheet here, we finished 2 of the tables. Now we have to finish the sales table here. So let's try to create the sales table in the same sheet. So I'm just gonna reduce the width of these columns here, this one as well. Okay. What we'll do is we will try to use the same functions, the same format for our sales table, right? Because as you can imagine, for sales table too, we would need all these columns. We would need the date on which we made a purchase. We would need the ID of the product, and we would have to obtain the name corresponding to that product ID, for which we would again use VLOOKUP function. And to obtain the price per unit, we should use ULOOKUP function as well. Okay, so we can reuse this table. So let's just copy this, right click, copy, and then go here. All right, so before pasting, I'm just gonna go to paste special, and I'm just gonna select formulas here. Okay, so what that will do is that it'll paste these cells along with the formulas inside. Now let's try to get the formatting as well. So I'm just gonna click on this little clipboard sign here, click on that, and it says, if you scroll down, there should be an option for source formatting. Here we go. Okay, so select keep source formatting, and now you see those are formatted. All right, so let's go ahead and resize all these columns here. So again, select O, press shift, select T, all these columns would be selected, and double click anywhere in between, and you can see that all the column widths are adjusted accordingly. All right. Okay, so what we'll do is we will just delete these cells or the values that we manually entered. Whatever we obtained through formulas here, we'll leave them as is. We'll change them as we go, because if we delete these values, the corresponding formulas would also be deleted. Okay, so we'll just remove only the manually entered values here. So the other one that we manually entered was the number of units. So let's go ahead and delete this too. Okay. Now let's put a random date. Say for example, we sold some products on 2nd of October. We'll just pick a different product here just to see how it works. Let's say we sold some laptops. So you see how it automatically populated the product name and the price per unit corresponding to the product ID. Okay, so our formulas got copy pasted correctly here. Now let's go ahead and enter some units here. Let's say we sold 40 laptops. All right, that's our stock value or sales value here. Okay. um okay, and let's just change this to sale value or sales value, and this we can rename it as purchases. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and enter two more sales here. So again, on the 4th of October, okay, let's say we purchased some projectors. All right, let's give a random unit here. I'm gonna say 17 probably. So the value is auto calculated. All right, one more entry, say probably on 9th of October. Okay, we purchased some keyboards, and let's say we purchased some 43 keyboards. All right, so that's the value calculated. Let's go ahead and give this table also a name. So I'm going to select the cell from P all the way to S, merge and center. Let's give a name to this table here. So we can call this as sales or inventory out or stock out. Okay, all mean the same thing here. Let's give a bold font to this text. All right, so there we have it. Okay, so we have created 3 out of our 4 tables. So if we go to our sheet, we had our opening stock, and then we created purchases, then we had sales table listing out all the sales that we did. The last one is we just need to create a closing stock table. Okay, so this closing stock table, it will have the information from all these 3 tables. All right. So before we go ahead and create that, I want to show one more great advantage of using tables, right? So let's say we decided to sell a new product here. Okay, so if we sell a new product, let me add let's see. So let's add a new product here, and I'm just gonna extend my table like this. So if I use this little wedge here and if I pull it down, so all I'm saying is I'm going to create 2 more columns in this, 2 more rows in that table. All right, so we'll just delete this. Okay, so let's say we wanted to sell a new product. What should we sell here now? One more electronics product. Let's say, why can't I think of any? Some hard drives. Okay, let's say we wanted to sell some hard drives. Price per unit is just a random number here, say 80. Okay, and units, say we had 82 units. All right. Okay, the stock value, because I deleted that 0 when it dragged down, so it didn't get the formula, so we're just gonna get the formula back again. Right, so there we have. Okay, now let's say we wanted to sell one more product here, or before this. All right, so with this new product entered, the beauty of tables is that since you put this data in a table, and so wherever you reference this table, any changes in the original table will get reflected over there. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So previously we had product IDs only till 109, right? So we just added 110 product. So the table was working fine. If I go to this drop down here, if I select the drop down, I should see that new product ID showing up here. Okay, previously it was only till 109. We didn't have to do anything at all. Just because we inserted this data as a table and we referenced that table in these calculations, so any changes that we make to the original table will get reflected here. Okay, so now if I select 110, as we can see that new name got picked up and the corresponding price per unit as well. Let's just go ahead and give date of purchase for these products, and let's say we purchased 28 hard drives. All right, and the purchase value is automatically calculated. So the similar thing should be reflected in the sales table as well. Now let's go ahead and add one more product here, EP1. Let's say now we decided to sell some speakers. Okay, so the average price of speakers is say 95. All right. And let's say we have 110 units in stock. We can see this is the total stock value. So now this EP11, it should show up in our purchases table and also in the sales table. Okay, so if we go ahead and click on this drop down list here, we can see we have our 2 new product IDs. So let's go ahead and select this one for speakers. So the name and the price per unit are auto populated here. So let's just say we bought some speakers on the 11th of October. Okay, and we bought 38 speakers. So this is the total sales value. All right. So these are some really cool things with using data as a table. So the first one that we saw was we can filter data with respect to any columns, and the biggest advantage is if you make any changes to your original table in terms of adding new data or deleting existing data, that will get reflected in this purchases and sales table. All right. So, okay. Now let's go ahead and create our final table here. So in order to create the final table, we will start with our initial table. So let's copy this data and we'll just paste with values and source formatting. I don't want it in the form of a table. I just want it as cells with the values and source formatting. Okay. So again, let's go ahead and select all these columns and double click anywhere. So the widths are auto adjusted. Columns are auto adjusted according to the text. Okay. So now this table should be like a consolidation of all these 3 tables, right? So along with showing the opening stock, it should also show us our purchases information and our sales information. Okay, so what we'll do is we will create 3 new columns, or before that, let's rename these units as opening stock, just so that it's more clear. It helps us to see what each column stands for, because we are going to add purchases and sales here. Okay, so let's go ahead and add 3 new columns before stock value. So right click, say insert, right click, say insert again, right click, say insert again. All right, so let's get our purchases here, sales, and closing stock. All right, we'll just change the font color here. I'll just make it black so that it stands out, and just regular text. All right. Okay, so we have our 3 new columns. So the idea here is, for our final table, we want to get how many total units did we purchase of a given product ID. Similarly, how many total units did we sell for a given product ID. All right. So how do we get the how can we get the number of purchases for a given product ID? So if you think about it, in order to get the number of units that were purchased, we need to go to the purchases table, right? So in this purchases table, we can see that we have different product names here, okay? But one thing we all understand is that it's not necessary that keyboards are sold or purchased only once, right? Like I can go ahead and buy some more keyboards, probably on 12th of October. All right, on this day, let's say we bought 15 keyboards. Okay, so yeah, the thing that I wanted to point out here is that every product can have multiple entries in the purchases table. Similarly, every product can have multiple entries in the sales table, because we can sell any given product more than one time, right? So what we are trying to do is, at least for the purchases column here, so we want to find out the total number of units that were purchased for this product ID. Okay, the total number of units of this product ID that were purchased. So what function can we use here? So we have to use a SUMIF here, right? Because we need to sum the units, but based on a condition, right? So the condition is wherever the product ID matches. So here, wherever EP102 matches, only those two values should be summed up for this particular product ID. All right. So let's go ahead and use a SUMIF function here. So the formula is in the first cell, just say SUMIF. What are we trying to match here? We are trying to match product IDs from the purchases table. Let's select all here. And where is the value that we are trying to match? It's over here, product ID. Okay. And once we find a match, once we find a row where all these values are matching, what should we sum? We want to sum the units. All right. So let's just select this range here, close the brackets. And again, we have to make this reference as absolute, because if we drag and apply this formula to the next cell, this I3 might change to I4, right? And L3 will also change to L4, I12 will go to I13. So it's just gonna skip one row at a time, but we want all the values to be considered for every SUMIF calculation. So for that reason, we will go ahead and make these starting and ending cell values as absolute. So you just click at the first cell, and then if you just press F4, it should include those dollar signs. All right. So in order to lock in a cell, we have to use two dollar signs, one before the column reference and the other one before the row reference. Okay. So I3, right? Where is I3? Here. So I3. So we always want to start from this location. Okay. So if you're on Mac, you have to use function or Fn key and then press F4. All right. So these both should be at the same time. So like that, let's go ahead and make the second column references also absolute. Okay. Let's see, SUMIF V3, and we want to have L13 to L12. All right. So for laptops, we got 0, because if we go to our purchases table, we can see that we didn't make any purchases for laptops. Okay. So that works out well. Let's apply this to all the other cells below that. Okay. All right. So as you can see here, some of them are 0. So whatever products we didn't purchase, those SUMIFs are 0. But for any products that we made some purchases, we will have some number, right? So let's cross check this. So this result shows we purchases 44 keyboards. Let's go back to our purchases table and cross check that. So in our purchases table, we can see we have one entry for keyboard here, 29 units, and then we have one more entry for keyboards with 15. So 29 plus 15 is 44. All right. So that's working out correctly. How about sales? Sales also similar concept, right? So for sales, we are going to use the sales table, and again, we'll have to use SUMIF here because every product can appear multiple times. Let's go ahead and add a different product here again. Let's add projectors again for random date of 2022. Let's say we sold 45 projectors. All right, so that's our value. Okay. So even for here, we have to use a SUMIF function because we want to get total units sold for a given product, right? So for example, projector, we have sold projectors 2 times. So we want to only sum whenever we find a match for the projectors here, right? So only these 2 units should be summed up for us. So let's go ahead and use a SUMIF function. We can either create another SUMIF function. Yeah, let's just go ahead and create. So, all right, let's start typing here SUMIF. Okay, SUMIF again. This time, where are we trying to match our product ID? It's in the sales table. So select that entire thing And where do we have the product ID that we are trying to match? It's here, okay, comma. Once that is matched, what should we sum up? We need to sum up these units. So let's select that range of cells here. Again, as before, let's make this cell references as absolute so that every time that entire range is considered for our sum function. Okay, hit enter. All right. So let's apply this to all the other cells below that. Okay, so we can see that probably for whatever products we didn't make any sales, we have zeros, and for whatever products we sold some units, we have some value. Let's cross check that again. So this table shows that we sold 40 laptops. Let's go to our sales table and let's cross check. Yes, we sold 40 laptops. Okay, and let's check for projectors here. So projectors, it shows we sold 62 units. Let's go back to the projectors table, and if we see, we have sold projectors here 17 units, and then one more time 45. So 45 plus 17 is 62. Okay, so this is working fine. Now the last part is let's calculate our closing stock, right? So how do we get our closing stock here? So if we go to our first sheet, so this is the formula we outlined for closing stock. Okay, so we have to sum up stocks that we had in the beginning plus any purchases that we made. If we subtract our sales, the units that we sold, then whatever we are left with is the closing stock for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply that. So we'll say opening stock plus purchases minus sales. Okay, so that should be our closing stock, or the stock that we are left with at the end of the day. All right, so we have to change this stock values too, because these are just static values here, but these should reflect our closing stock now. Okay, so the new stock value for us would be our closing stock, the number of units that we have left with, times price per unit. Okay, now if you apply this to all the other cells, we have our values. All right, so just a simple exercise here with how we can keep track of our inventory, or how we can get an overview of what was our opening stock, how many purchases of each unit product did we make, and how many units of each product did we sell. All right, so let's go ahead and give a name to this table here. So I think I'll just merge these three cells here, X, Y, Z. Select those, merge and center. I'll name this table as closing stock. Okay, let's give a bold font here. All right. Okay. So all these tables are interconnected. What I mean by that is let's try to add a new entry into our purchases table and see if it gets reflected in our closing stock table. Okay. So let's go ahead and add a new entry here. We'll just add something that we have not bought before, probably 107. Okay, tablets, and let's say we purchased 49 units of tablets, and we purchased it on 15th October. Okay, let's see if this new purchase gets reflected in our final table or not. Yes, so as you can see here, the purchase of 49 units now gets reflected. Okay, similarly, let's try that with adding a new entry to the sales. So we'll try to sell some VR headsets. So right now we can see we have 0 sales of those headsets. So let's go to our sales table. All right, I specifically want VR headset. So we'll just cross check the product ID for that. So for VR headsets, the product ID is 109. Okay, so let's go ahead and select 109, and we have our VR headsets. Let's give a date. Let's say we sold some VR headsets on 14th of October, and we sold, let's say, how many? 32 VR headsets. Okay, now this should be reflected in our final table. Let's check that. All right. So as we can see here, it is now reflected in the final table too. So All right, so this was the exercise here, and as you can see, this is a small inventory management setup. But again, there are a lot of things that we can learn out of this exercise, and it's really cool how everything is connected and how everything gets updated when you change something in one of the places. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much. Oh, all right. I'm sorry. Before I finish up, I just wanted to. Okay, so before we wrap up, just one more thing here. This is good to see individual product IDs, individual purchases, and sales by each product ID, but we might most probably be more interested in the final totals, right? So we'll create a new cell called totals here. So totals, let's give different cell color here, this one, and we'll just sum up all this. Okay, sum up the opening stock. This shows how much was our opening stock, and if we sum up our purchases, it will show up how many units we purchased. And if we sum our sales, how many units we sold and how many units are we left out with. All right, and then if we again sum up the final column values here, we will get our the value of final inventory on hand. All right, I hope this was clear, and thank you so much. Let me know if there are any questions.